Hi, I'm Keegan. Welcome back to GM Talks. We're still on our political high horse, and I am joined by Hiromi. Welcome, Hiromi.
Hi, Type. One Hiromi, I mean. I'm Hiromi. I use they and she pronouns, and I am a fairly prolific game designer. I've worked on over 100 games, specifically over 100 tabletop RPGs. I've worked on more games than that, but they're primarily RPGs. It's my bread and butter.
Yeah, I saw that you've done work for Scion, Adventure, some Exalted. Um,
Yeah, I'm the creative lead for Scion, so in that capacity, and also as a writer and developer, I think I've worked on like 30 or 40 Scion books. I have a spreadsheet somewhere. I can I can actually find that out.
Perfect. Well, Scion is actually a good place to go because Scion has been fairly, from everything I understand from people, respectful to various cultures about their deities and cultural sensitivity. And Rich Thomas made probably the funniest remark on the internet after that debacle with the W5 art, going, "Yeah, we asked someone, so we didn't do it." I believe on an official Onyx Path stream. So I was wondering, you know, what kind of political and cultural considerations as the lead designer do you take when creating these books or setting out, like, maybe as a mission statement?
So, sorry, just so that I'm uh, wrapping up the loose thread, I looked it up. I have worked on 36 Scion books, so a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, to speak to your question, there there's sort of a number. So frequently, when I talk about Scion, especially to people who are working on it, I talk about how there are multiple stakeholders. And so, like, there are multiple sets of people that we have to do right by when we're making a Scion book. Um, oh, and I guess sort of to like pull back a little bit for people who might not necessarily be familiar with Scion. Scion is an RPG where you play the child of a god, and being the child of a god, it sort of imbues you with power that lets you run around and change the world, usually through punching people, but you don't have to. There's plenty of other options in Scion. And so the various stakeholders that I like to point to are we need to do right by the people whose stories that we're telling. So, like the living communities that still exist. And even if the worshippers for a given pantheon are really low down in numbers, uh, there there's still a community out there. Otherwise, we wouldn't know anything about them. Um, we also want to be respectful to the people who told the stories. So, like, not sort of taking concepts totally out of context and losing the essence of what people created when they made those stories. And we also want to be respectful to the gods because, in many cases, stories are older, having been passed down the line. But in Scion, they're part of the world. So, like, we don't want to make it seem like the gods have been static, like they aren't a living, breathing part of the world, because that is sort of denying them agency. And trying to keep all three sets of stakeholders in mind when we're working on either explaining a new pantheon or showing how the myths can be played through or reenacted within the game. It's not easy, but we do careful research to make sure that we're getting things as right as we can, and also making sure that like we're being respectful to people, because these cultures have real communities, and if we do a bad job, then they're the ones who are getting harmed by it.
That makes sense. Yeah. That excuse me. I was kind of wondering about that because I do know that there was some. I spoke with Dixie and Neil a while back. I think it was when Demigod was coming out, and there was some talk about how there was the creative choice to make sure that it's the modern world now, but the deities are a part of it, which I think was an interesting choice, regardless from the jump from first to second edition.
Mhm.
But the how some people didn't like that implications and just kind of the acceptance of not being able to make everyone happy, because I know there was some disagreement at least early on when that choice was made. I don't know if you were part of the project at that time or not.
I didn't directly work on Demigod.
Okay.
Um, like my work on it was largely serving as a cultural consultant. Uh, but yeah, no, it's treating gods, um, or rather, framing gods as a living, breathing part of the world is difficult to do because, like, we can't know what they're doing as people. Like, that's generally not how religion works.
Yeah.
Um, like, we only know what they do on Earth, and that's an extremely limited portion of what they can do, and therefore what they actually do in the world of Scion. So, yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act to try to get everything working right.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes perfect sense to me. I was wondering then, because it's everything is political, as we know.
Mhm.
How do you think your politics enter your writing and your development work, and how do you balance that without maybe preaching to the choir while making sure that any kind of firm political or moral convictions kind of seep through so that people know where the game may stand.
So I wanted to just sort of like take a second
Okay.
and frame the idea as of games as political because not not everyone is necessarily like not everyone necessarily knows or believes that that's true. But well, it is. All art is political, and especially art that forces players to reimagine themselves as other people who have the power and social agency to change the world around them. Like even something as simple as dungeon crawls are actually intensely political because they are answering the questions: who's allowed to fight, who's allowed to kill, whom or what are you allowed to kill, to whom do things belong to? Is stealing from the dead okay? Is killing explicitly to take their stuff okay? Like in general, dungeon crawlers kind of replicate colonialism. Uh, they don't necessarily do it deliberately, but they do it, and it's political as hell to have someone who's foreign to a region invade it, kill natives, and take their stuff. Like people don't think of dungeon crawlers and other things like that as being political, but like that's that's exactly what's going on.
Oh yeah, and I don't know if it was completely unintentional, just based on some of the few posts I saw old Gary Gygax make back in the day, and I think if you look at the books that he drew inspiration from, it's why, and I'd mentioned this in other episodes of this, especially to James Sembrano, is D&D and dungeon crawlers specifically have kind of like a fantasy coat of paint, but they really play more like a Wild West game where you're
Mhm.
expanding out, once again, taking resources to improve the quote unquote good species while making sure the bad species are either converted or killed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
Uh,
for
sorry,
for
go
some
ahead.
Oh, and just some context for you, I kind of came up with this series of interviews and GM talks is to kind of explore things because I like tabletops a lot and I do find them to be art, and I'm kind of tired of a certain very vocal subsect of the community trying to cheapen tabletops by trying to remove that element of it. And so I really want to kind of explore this with writers, content creators, and just regular people. Like, what does that politics in games mean? How do politics maybe bleed into changing views at people at the table, how you write your games, etc., etc.
Yeah, so I tend to focus in on indigenous and LGBTQIA two spirit plus rights. So like an example is that in a recent Mage book, I want to say Faces of Magic, I made a story hook that presents the opportunity and need for the PCs to preserve indigenous stories, which is like laudable and important. Like, no one wants those stories to be lost, but at the same time, who has the right to preserve those stories? Who has the right to be telling them and sharing them? Who gets to control indigenous knowledge? And that question immediately comes into play because I introduce an indigenous group who doesn't want the PCs to record the stories. So, like, in that case, I'm very much talking about indigenous sovereignty as well as valuing indigenous knowledge because it's important to me and just like in general. Um, Indigenous folks around the world have been marginalized, had their stories erased, changed, sort of retold by people outside their communities, and um, like in some cases, like the original stories are difficult, if not impossible, to find if you're not part of that community. And all outsiders have is sort of the bastardized version of it. So, like, grappling with those questions, I think, is valuable for players, even if no one comes up with a exact answer that satisfies everyone. Because I think the question is more important than the answer. Really considering the issues at hand is uh, just kind of something that we all should do more frequently. Um, um, Related to that, in I think my first book that I worked on, which is Mage the Ascension's Gods and Monsters, I portray a few creatures from Okinawa, which my ancestors are from. I'm an indigenous Okinawan, and I sort of portray Okinawa as being a site full of native magical creatures who want to protect the islanders, which in turn restricts the ability to operate for both of Mage's major factions, the traditions and the technocracy. And in doing so, I'm creating a space that is a third space, one that is neither controlled by the technocracy nor the traditions, whereas in many of the other places in Mage, the battle lines have been drawn and the turf kind of carved up. In this case, there's a third space, an indigenous space, and in order to do anything, you kind of have to respect the inhabitants that were here before you. And that's something that I think most indigenous people would feel like they want because it's so rare for it to happen. I also said that I work or that I like create works with LGBTQIA two spirit plus characters. And generally what I'm doing there is I'm just kind of showing that these characters exist and not trying to make grand sweeping moral statements with them, because I think the conversation these days is unfortunately A lot of people arguing that we don't exist or shouldn't exist, and showing, hey, no, we're part of this world. We exist. We're real. Is valuable. Like, there's never been a world without queer people in it. Like, our world has always had queer people and will always be around as long as people are around. And like that's attested and documented throughout cultures, throughout ages, in archaeology and in art. So like presenting playable characters or useful NPCs as being queer just sort of shows that like we exist in this space, and that in itself is a hot political topic. It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. But for very dumb reasons, it is.
Oh, I have a werewolf the apocalypse actual play, and I get some I occasionally get right wing people who just hear the splatterpunk parts at the start and go, "Oh, this is awesome! This is my jam!" And I can tell exactly when they stop where they get in my series, because I'll have a new subscriber for like 5, 6 days, and then several of the canonically like trans characters for my game show up, and that number goes down a few days later, and it's very it's very not interesting. It's very annoying because it's like, hey man, it's they're gonna be here. I'm part of the queer community. I have lots of people who are trans in my life, so they're going to be included in this world. I even added different layers of gender to the law neutral chaos spectrum in one of the games I ran to make it an integral part of how the world kind of works, because they're fundamental forces, and how people express themselves are related to those fundamental forces.
Neat.
Yeah, so gender fluid people fall under chaos because they're not static. If you're cis or transitioning from one gender to the other, you're under law because that's the set box. And then agender people, non-binary people, things like that will fall under the neutral box, because that's they like true neutral is kind of it's a balance. You can be a little of both, constant changes, not constant changing, but a couple restraints.
Okay. Neat.
Yeah, but I'm
And
sorry, I interrupted.
no, it's totally fine. Like that's fun and interesting, sort of gamifying gender. And I want to be clear that like I don't just make positive queer characters, because like that would be disingenuous. They're just because someone's queer doesn't mean that they're a good person. Um, that said, if I'm going to have a queer villain in a game book, I'm also going to have someone who is a more positive representation, because if that's the only book of mine that someone picks up, I want them to see that queer morality is on a spectrum. Like there's not just evil. Like I don't want there to be just bad representation, because like that's how people develop shitty views. Like that's been a problem throughout the past, I don't know how many years.
Since the Hayes Code.
Yeah.
Well, at least in, I guess, film media.
Yeah. And like people are complicated, and so characters deserve space to be complicated. It makes the worlds that we play in more lifelike and engaging. Like it just adds verisimilitude. It's a good thing. Um, and like sometimes when I'm doing stuff, the representation can get a little extreme. And that's almost always reflective of the world that I'm writing for. Like when we made Dead Man's Rust for Scarred Lands, we have something like 30 or 40 conspicuously trans or non-binary characters in it. Uh, and a big part of the reason for that is that many of them are Hollow Knights or Hollow Legionnaires, And these are characters that kind of exist as living suits of armor. And as living suits of armor, they don't have biology providing any sort of role in helping inform their gender. So, like, as they develop, as they grow, they have to figure out gender for themselves. And in the case of the Hollow Legionnaires, they were created. So, like, honestly, canonically, very few of them should uh, be a binary gender because they don't have really any stake in it. Hollow Legionnaires are a little bit more complicated because they are sort of the reawakened souls of people who have passed, but they don't have their old memories. So they're not tied to their original gender in any way because they're not tied to their old lives at all. They can remember snippets of it, and so like that can change who they are and what they do. Uh, but they're free to explore their new lives and work however they wish. And in many cases, in Dead Man's Rust, that meant that they were trans, non-binary, or even agendered. Because if you were a living suit of armor, what use do you have for gender? um,
Yeah, me and Travis talked about that actually a few weeks ago. He was really excited about that talking point and was one of the ones he was thinking about, and that the world building informed and created a political choice, one that him and he said the writers stood behind as good, but that it wasn't initially crafted as a political statement, but it just ended up being one. Because, as you said, it is an unfortunate reality of the world we live in that transness is seen as some sort of grand political grandstand rather than, just existence.
yeah. And it was also something that we didn't set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were at least two trans authors on it. I don't know how many of us there were altogether because, um, well, one, I don't want to out anyone, and two, the workspace for that was a Slack, and free Slacks just delete themselves essentially after like a year or so. So I can't go back and check. Um, but we wanted to like we each sort of made the independent realization that having diverse gendered folks was important. And then when we saw all of our characters assembled, we're like, holy shit, this is a lot of representation. It's justified, it's good, but it's still a lot.
Absolutely. It's one of the big changes to Werewolf I made because of the whole debacle of changing ways that does not have to be redressed here. But yeah, there's a lot of because the Garu as beings of half spirit shouldn't really have strong ties to gender in my mind. So I have a lot of trans and non-binary Garu, especially among the Black Furies, because of that spiritual aspect of your body's only part of you. Your spiritual reflection is the other part, and that seems to be the more important part, and that seemed a natural part of the world building that was ignored from an official supplement.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Um, I think I saw on your collection of drive-through RPG books that you had worked on an age game for Cthulhu.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
I'm
Cthulhu Awakens.
Yes, a Cthulhu Awakens. So I'm kind of curious because I actually think in the space Call of Cthulhu or any kind of Cthulhu related media is some of the most political because they either have to kind of not address the elephant in the room and maybe make a couple tweaks here and there or actively kind of challenge H.P. Lovecraft's more regressive views. And I was wondering if you had that in mind when you worked in that book, or if it was just something you naturally drifted towards.
Oh, we definitely had it in mind. Also, there was or is Scion Masks of the Mythos, which also takes on Lovecraft. And I believe in both books, I'm checking right now, the sort of disclaimer up front that we know that H.P. Lovecraft was intensely problematic. Like he was a bigot in many ways. Um, and we're taking his source material and we're taking it in a new direction. Um, yeah. Both books have that like right up front.
Okay.
Cthulhu Awakens is a little bit subtler slash more nuanced, whereas Masks of Mythos just outright says, yeah, no, he was a bigot, and we're not. So we're going to take this in a new direction while still keeping the cosmic horror that is so fun to play with. And a lot of what I did for Cthulhu Awakens specifically was sort of I did most of the magic system, so like just gobs of spells and the way that you cast spells. And a lot of what I did there was informed by sort of a um, pre-modern idea, so pre-D&D conceptualizations of magic, like in Hounds of Tindalos, in I believe it's a short story, it might be a novella. The concept is kind of that there are these hounds that exist with a different relationship to dimensions than we do. So like if a corner has a certain angle to it, then they can just sort of pop in and out of it. Um, and that sort of, I don't want to say old timey concept of multidimensional math is like super interesting to me on a number of levels. And like I'm not exactly a math nerd, but I'm very much more into math than the average person. So like when I worked on video games, I was the one coding the 3D graphics, which entails four-dimensional math, because you have to be able to in order to represent things in 3 dimensions, you have to calculate them in four, because you kind of always have to work one dimension higher than what the output is. So, long story short, there's a fair number of spells in Cthulhu Awakens that are directly informed by the idea of mathematics, back in sort of a pre-modern period where we didn't really know what would happen if you fully explored equations and solved things. Like there was always this idea that you could work out a problem and that would cause a fundamental shift in what reality is, which is kind of how D&D magic works. It's just that the conceptualization has been abstracted away into this sort of Vancian spell slot system.
Yeah.
Um,
I I have read Jack Vance's Dying Earth, and I do find it funny in the first little short story of it. He's being taught geometry and algebra, and it's like, yeah, these are the fundamental building blocks of magic. So
yeah,
kind of on the lines that you're talking about.
yeah, absolutely. And there's also fun stuff like oniromancy, which used to be a thing, isn't really a thing anymore. For folks who aren't necessarily up on their Greek prefixes, it means like the viewing or of dreams. And One of the things in cosmic horror, especially with Lovecraft, is the idea that dreams take place on a different plane of reality, and you can personally visit that world uh, through sleep, but also just traveling there. Uh, and one way is a little bit more perilous than the other, but neither are safe because nightmares can always happen. And if you're physically there, then nightmares can fuck you up. And so, sort of tailing off of oneromancy, which is just sort of like using dreams to figure things out, there's the concept of oneronauts, who are the people who can actually travel to the dream world, which is just sort of such a fun and weird little concept.
Yeah, I'm personally looking forward to a seventh edition Dreamlands of Kadath book actually, because I think the update will do well. Because I don't know how familiar or how into, I guess, would be maybe more apt for the Chaosium's Call of Cthulhu games, especially the newest edition.
I'm not familiar with the new edition. I don't remember what edition I played. It was like I think the last time I played was around 2010,
Okay,
so probably whatever edition was in
that'd be.
vogue at that time.
I think that's sixth at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, but seventh they do a couple mechanically. There's a couple quality of life changes, like the resistance table is gone and all attributes are percentiles now. But an interesting thing that has happened with the new Call of Cthulhu is it's drifting away from the nihilism of it. I think just because nihilism is just not in vogue given the state of everything. But a big thing that they have been very purposeful in their new adventures, and I notice and I really appreciate it, is they call out the race of every single NPC, including the white ones, to try and decenter whiteness as just the default assumption within their published adventures.
Nice.
Yeah, and a lot of things have been kind of diving to that. They have a whole section of people of color and queerness in their newest edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight and things like that. And it's very clear that they're making kind of a concerted effort to make the Call of Cthulhu more inclusive while still trying to figure out how to be faithful to Lovecraft while repudiating his views. And it's very interesting from just from a pure like scholarly point of view of how games evolve over time.
Yeah, definitely. It turns out that my copy of Call of Cthulhu was within arm's reach, so it was sixth, just like you thought.
Perfect. Now I started on sixth as well, so because that's about the time I picked it up. Actually, funny enough, throughout 2010, 2012, I always find the different takes of Cthulhu very interesting, because of it being almost a litmus test, right? Like, are you going to talk about the elephant in the room? Are you going to ignore it? Are you going to regurgitate it uncritically? Things like that. It's just very. It's just a way to see into the mind of both the publisher, probably, and maybe some of the writers as well.
Yeah, for sure. Masks of Mythos, I had some fun with. I think we probably all had fun with it. Um, but we so in Scion, you're the child of a god. Your character's the child of a god, and in Masks of Mythos, we expand the selection of gods to the old ones and the great ones. So like you can end up with this really bizarre relationship to reality because maybe you are somehow the child of like Yog Sothoth or something. And like that informs how you work in the world. Even if like you weren't necessarily like the literal born child of any of them, if instead you were sort of claimed or chosen as being the child or embodiment. Um, we Scion has a few systems that think about like what kind of role someone has in the game, and if you are a Masks of Mythos character, then those roles have a different bend to them because you're not just a warrior. You're a warrior who thinks of things in sort of an alien way. You're not necessarily the same kind of trickster. I'm trying to think who even would be a trickster in the mythos.
Maybe Nyarlathotep?
Yeah, no, that would make sense. That's probably
Yeah.
what we did if we did it.
Okay.
Now I'm curious. Did we have any tricksters?
I've seen the Mythos book. I have not grabbed it, but I have had thoughts more recently, and I don't know if Scion would be the good avenue for that. It might be. Is the cosmic horror of cosmic bliss? It was something I had watched and sparked some ideas, especially with Yogg-Sothoth. That's why it made me think of this, since Yogg-Sothoth is essentially everything all at once. The creature between worlds and everything is Yogg-Sothoth. That sense of connection with everything and the bliss that is, but the cosmic horror of as you expand your consciousness, the less you are you, because you are now becoming everything as well.
Oh, very fun.
Yeah. I don't know how I'd run that in a role-playing game, but I'll get there eventually.
Sticking on Mask of the Mythos, one of the things that we did was we wanted to have some existing characters. So, like, characters who we pulled from Mythos stories and made playable or usable characters. And I think my favorite is probably Roberta Olmsted. If the name sounds familiar at all, it's because Robert Olmsted, Roberta's dead name, is the narrator for Call of Cthulhu.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, I really liked doing that.
Yeah, that's
I feel like it would really piss off old Howie, and he deserves it.
oh yes.
But like at the same time, I, or rather, the author did. I don't think I worked directly on it aside from providing direction. Well, it's like the idea that Roberta's life has been horrific. So like she's proud of who she is, but like she's been transformed in several ways, and like one of those is not really her agency behind it. Like she's she's a descendant. So for like people who don't have Call of Cthulhu in their brains, the narrator of Call of Cthulhu is spoiler alert. Spoiler for like a 70-year-old novella.
I think it's 100 years old now.
What?
Yeah,
Holy
was it
shit.
Call of Cthulhu was released in like the 1920s, wasn't it? Let me look
You're
that up.
probably right, but now I have to look it up.
Yeah.
Damn it, Wikipedia, I don't mean the RPG. Written in 1926, published 1928. So
Okay.
yeah, no, you're right. It is just under 100 years old. Damn.
Yeah. I think it feels like it must have been more recent just because the explosion didn't happen until well after his death of
Yeah,
popularity. But no,
which I mean,
fair.
as a writer, that sucks, but also
As him
he
not
kind of
getting.
sucked.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Like exactly. Well, I mean, I don't know if you've ever read any of the Conan the Barbarian novels, but there's like at some points it's okay and like
mhm.
normal fantasy levels of problematic, and then there's just a freight train of racism that hits you, disappears after like two sentences of vitriol, never comes back, and Robert E. Howard, who wrote those, had corresponded with Lovecraft, going, "Hey man, turn down the racism. That's not cool." And he's like, "Well,
Yeah, when Robert E. Howard calls you out, you're a problem.
yeah, yes, exactly." It's like, wow.
Oh, right. The thing that I in Call of Cthulhu, uh Roberta finds out like that she's descended from essentially fish people, which I mean that I think would disturb most people, finding out that what's in their family tree is not only something that they didn't know, but was something that is decidedly non-human, and that in an abstract way is kind of a representation of Lovecraft's politics, because like if if someone's digging back in their family tree and they're finding that, oh hey, my great 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 grandfather was black, or I probably for Lovecraft if someone had an Italian great grandfather or something.
Oh no, it's way funnier. This is a
Mhm.
piece of trivia I do know. The
Okay.
Shadows over Innsmouth was written, though he didn't want to publish it. He was actually embarrassed by it because he was trying to be less racist, supposedly at the time. He wrote it like a year or two after he went through his own genealogy, after talking about how he was from great English nobility and found out he had a Welsh ancestor, and he was devastated.
Yeah, no, that tracks. Like, and that just kind of goes to show that, like, even something as simple as just like, oh, my family tree has something unexpected in it, can actually be representative of like a larger like political concept. Like, art is political. The choices that we make as authors and the choices that we make as readers or otherwise consumers of art, like they're not in a vacuum. There's always something informing it because as people, we always have context. Sometimes that context is complete bullshit that we just make up, but it came from somewhere. Um, it's being a human's weird.
Oh yes, this is not in the RPG space, but I'm curious if you've ever read the short novella "The Litany of Earth."
I don't think so.
Oh, it's a great book novella. It was written in 2014. I think it's still free on Tor.com, but you can get copies of it as well. And it's about this woman who was just a girl when they raided Innsmouth. She is an Innsmouth person, is put in camps, and then she actually, when World War II rolls around, the Japanese internment camps, concentration camps are created. She bonds with this Japanese family. This is all precursor to the novel, and then they're all let go. They realize that the Deep One people aren't actually that big of a threat to America, and it follows her trying to reconnect to her culture because it's gone. Innsmouth has been destroyed, and like the government comes to her basically and goes, hey, we wanted you to check out these cults to see if they're truly dangerous or not. And she's like, you want me to inform for you? And like, hey, we want you to protect these religious practices from extremists and things like that, so that it's not marred and things like that. And her complex feelings about that, and her going to regular humans who are aping her religious practices, and how she sees where they're getting it wrong, or their pronunciation is wrong, but how she feels at home in these kind of ceremonies. It's a great little, I think it's like 20 or 30 pages.
Neat. I'm looking at the listing for it. I'll definitely have to read that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it, and I think it is. Then there's a couple novels that come out after it, using the Cold War as a framing device. I haven't gotten to those yet, but I've thought of using those kinds of things in Cthulhu games and things like that to muddy the waters, right? This like sometimes it's okay to have a purely evil faction things, and I think some games pull it off better than others.
Hmm.
I'm not. Are you familiar with Morkborg?
Vaguely.
Okay, it's they admit that everything's political, and their cyborg book actually has a whole rule zero where it's like, hey, you are encouraged to break every rule in this book but this one. You are not cops. You do not work with the corpse all the time. You're not friendly to these people. You might work with them out of convenience, but they are and will forever be your enemy. Kind of like punk
Nice.
punk aesthetics. But Morkborg, it has goblins in it, and goblins are not a fantasy species. They're a curse. And it's probably the most horrifying depiction of a goblin I've ever heard of. So if a goblin attacks you, even if it misses and it runs away, you have like 3 days to find that goblin and kill them, or you turn into a goblin and your body is hijacked by this curse where you are conscious, seeing all the horrors your body is doing without you being able to have any control over it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's such a horrifying twist on something that was essentially just really bad coding for indigenous people in a way to reclaim that monster while, rejecting the D&D aspect of it.
Yeah, and like a huge contrast to the way that Paizo does it. Like Paizo's familiar to me because I've done like a decent amount of work for Pathfinder.
Okay.
And for folks unfamiliar with Pathfinder goblins, they're manic pixie people basically. Like they might be manic pixie dream people. They might just be like disasters, but they fill a similar niche as gnomes do in like vanilla D&D, where they're just curious and hyper creatures. And so, like, in a number of adventures, one-shots, and even plushies, there's this depiction of Pathfinder goblins as being these kind of cheerful little folks who are just, like, living their best lives, even if it means blowing stuff up and setting stuff on fire. They're goblins.
I was gonna say they're like slightly more anarchistic Kender from Dragonlance.
Yes.
Actually, I don't play a lot of Pathfinder. It's a little too crunchy for me, even though I play Exalted. I couldn't tell you. But I've read a little bit of the second edition, and I really do appreciate Paizo's attempt for the more humanoid monsters to really humanize them, to make it so that they don't all, even if they're quote unquote evil creatures, that they have redeeming qualities, that they're not just irredeemable things, that they can be antagonists, but they can also just be people you discover about. I think they did one with the Knolls and how they're a matriarchal society. They have these things that might seem concerning to outsiders, but to them it's not concerning because of, XYZ about them and how it doesn't hurt them.
Yeah, and they also have been doing good work with sort of re-exploring continents that they had in first edition, where very early in D&D's history, there was basically like an African island or continent, and like an Asian one, and Gygax was not like a terribly well-informed person with nuanced views on anything. So like those depictions are kind of fucking awful. And earlier depictions in Pathfinder were much better, but I think mostly told by people from outside of the communities that those continents and countries represented. And like 2 years ago, maybe more, Paizo reached out to, I want to say 41 Asian authors, myself included, to work on the Tianxia World Guide and the Tianxia Character Guide, because there was this concept like, well, it's Fantasy Asia. What the fuck does that mean? And so they turned us loose to add gobs of nuance to it. Like you don't just get like an area that is just Fantasy Japan or just Fantasy China. You get one that's like a very specific concept of the world and the people from it. And like if you just like flip through the book, just looking at the art, there's a hugely diverse set of styles there. Like they all, if you don't know what you're looking at, they all read as Asian just fine because they are Asian, but there are dozens of different cultures being represented because like we came from a bunch of different cultures and we wanted to bring our heritages to this stage, and we knocked that fucker out of the park. I am gonna brag on it. It is a good pair of books. I feel like our any gold was well deserved.
Oh, for sure. And by all means, brag. I think good work should be bragged about. And I always thought that interesting. And this is kind of, it plays a little bit to my statement that D&D and Pathfinder, to varying degrees, at least initially, is once again kind of a Wild West with a fantasy coat of paint, because the default assumption is Europe, in big air quotes, and that's a very American view of Europe because Europe's a whole continent with multiple cultures and things like that too, and this flattening of it, and then like the African island, and it's just like Africa's like the largest continent on Earth. Like there's so many different cultures and things like that that can be explored. So this weird flattening that I think stems from a very American worldview has been kind of permeating through the tabletop community and writing for some time, at least in the generic fantasy genre.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and even so, like the African island, I want to say it was. I don't know why I'm gonna speculate. It's right behind me. Nope, not behind me there. Damn it. There it is.
I too have trouble getting through all my bookshelves of role playing books. It's
Okay, I don't know where it is, and I feel like it's not good radio for me to search for it. So,
sure.
um,
Like I said,
but like,
I have issues looking through all my books too. I have too many that I want to run one day.
yeah, exactly. But like the module that it showed up in is called the Isle of Dread, and like that's a fucking awful name to just sort of go, hey, all the black people in our world, they come from here. It's the Isle of Dread. I'm like, what the fuck?
That's some dark continent 1920s fucking speak.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, no, I have the Isle of Dread actually. I think that was Wizards who did that one. Yes, yes. Oh no, I sold it. I sold the Isle of Dread. Oh goodness. But yeah,
Uh,
agreed. And then I think there was real controversy. I remember Polygon talking about how some people were like, "Hey, you got no black or African people to actually like write on this book." And one of the things is that they have a click language, and that's kind of like those languages exist, but it's kind of fucked up that you didn't consult anyone.
yeah. Yeah, Isle of Dread is the looks like it's actually the first module for D&D published in '81. So
Oh, interesting.
yeah, it's
Oh, I have the original and the Goodman Games upgrade to fifth
oh,
edition right there
gotcha.
on my shelf. There it is. I just looked over and I was like, ah. No, and it's true, and it pains me as someone who likes OSR games and tinkering with them. Right? Is like there's skeletons of really interesting ideas, but you gotta just go through and like retool a lot of things for your own sensibilities to actually make it fully enjoyable, because some of those old adventures have say a couple things, you know, I don't want that in my game, no thank you, sort of stuff.
Yeah. And now that I'm like looking at Wikipedia's description of it, they so it's termed the Island of Dread, but apparently it is, or rather, it has a village called Tangaroa, which is really fucking close to Tangaroa.
Oh,
who is one of the major Polynesian gods. And I'm like, um, don't fucking do that.
yeah. Yes. Agreed.
That's like just rolling up and making a small primitive backwards village uh, named Jesus. I'm
Yeah.
like, don't do that.
Fair enough. Yeah. I like make me do an anagram of like Washington D.C. of a bunch of backwards weirdos. But no, agreed. And like it's disappointing because in some places, like I have a 3.5 adventure. I think it was like a free adventure that dropped when 3.5 first came out, and like all the orcs are of course technically evil alignment, but they're being controlled by an evil human because they actually live pretty peacefully, or as like goblins. I think the goblins live peacefully with this human village, and then they started raiding, and no one knows why. And then it turns out like these outsiders came in and forced them, and so they're getting the brunt of the adventurers' damage, and it's meant as a reveal to make the players think. And it's real weird thinking that if an adventure like that dropped today, there's not an insignificant subset of the internet that would lose their fucking mind.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm being ranty. I apologize.
No, it's totally fine.
Just
Yeah, it's just sort of like a matter of looking at the content that we're engaging with in more informed eyes, or in some
yeah.
cases, deliberately uninformed.
Yes, for sure. And all right, so yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. My brain just kind of shut off. I apologize.
No, it's no worries.
But I know we're getting close to time. Is there any kind of closing thoughts you have about our kind of discussion? Anything you want to get out that maybe we tangented away from before I let you go?
Um, I think just like the idea that TTRPGs, like all art, like it's political, even if it doesn't seem like it. If something seems completely apolitical, then it's probably reinforcing the values that you have. Like those values seem invisible to you because you hold them, and so they don't seem like a political stance. They seem like they're just the truth. And very few things that we hold as humans are actually like empirical truths. Um, and even if they started that way, or even if they started in our understanding as being empirically true, science revises itself all the time. Like we keep learning more about the world around us and how it's complicated as fuck. And that complexity, if we can like properly show it off, it makes our games richer and more interesting because there's so much more depth that we get out of them. So like don't don't shy away from having politics in your games. Just be conscious of what you're adding, or at least try to be conscious of what you're adding and what you're engaging with.
Perfect. Hiromi, thank you so much for joining me. Is there any place online you want to be found if you indeed want to be found?
I have a Blue Sky. I believe it's just Hiromi Cota. Maybe there's a dot. No dot. Just Hiromi Cota. HIROMICOTA. Dot bluesky dot social. And then my website, hiromicota.com, which is basically just a portfolio with a crap ton of games and even more that I need to add because they've been published since the last time I updated.
Perfect. I've been Keegan. This is a bunch of gamers. You can find us on YouTube, Podbean, Listen Notes, and many other places. I'm on Facebook, Blue Sky, but you'll never find me on Twitter. I always found it a cesspool, and I was proven right. Thank you.